Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of... Okay, let's get it done.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome in to Gamecock Pod Live for March the 5th, episode number 1704, where it is Addison's birthday week. She turned 12 on Sunday, and we celebrate every single day this week. I still can't believe she's 12. All right, we got a show to do. Let's jump into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and highlights brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. You know I'm talking about Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with a whole hog barbecue. Whatever your catering needs, Nana's Porch has got you covered. So go to the home site, nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him the Cockfather sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Get on the schedule now. Get on the calendar. Schedule your event. It's wedding season is right around the corner. And some people even get married during football season. I don't really understand that. I guess it's a law. I don't know. That's an ode to the funniest man in America, Roy Gregory, who sadly passed away a few months ago. An amazing comedian. But even if you don't have a catering event, and you love pimento cheese, you want to go to nanasporch.com. Look in the top right corner of the home page. Click on pimento cheese. It will take you to a hyperlink where you can order Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. Both the regular flavor and smoky jalapeno have been voted number one in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. And they've also been voted number one and number two by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association in the meat and cheese category. Checkout is simple, safe, secure. It's just a few clicks. Shipping is absolutely free of charge. Southern Foods will ship it right to your front door step at no additional charge. It's the best damn pimento cheese on the planet. Whether it's a sandwich, finger sandwiches for an event, a snack on a weekend while you're watching hoops or golf, or I guess the spring football league will be cranking up here soon. Or like me on a Stacy's sea salt pita chip, you can't beat it. So order plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. All right, last night, Gamecock baseball after being swept by Clemson, used a strong bottom of the 6th inning for a 7-3 come from behind win over Davidson. The Gamecocks scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 6th to get the win. After Davidson, they jumped out to a 3-0 lead on Jack Catron's 3-run homer. Henry Kazmar, a good sign. He hit his first home run of the season. Also, in the first inning, it remained 3-1 until the 6th. Nathan Hall's 2-run single gave Carolina a 4-3 lead. An Ethan Petrie double and a Jace Warda sacrifice fly made it 6-3. Warda hit by a pitch in the 7th, provided the last run. Tyler Pitzer gets the win. Striking out a pair to end the top of the 6th. South Carolina back in the midweek tonight facing the Citadel down in Charleston at 7 p.m. That game will be streaming on ESPN+. All right, South Carolina's number 9 ranked softball team coming off a sweep of number 8 Duke on the road. They are 19-0. They swept the number 8 team. They have the 3rd ranked RPI. They host Youngstown State tonight at 6 p.m. That will also be on SEC Plus. First-year coach and former Gamecock Ashley Chastain Woodard will attempt to tie a school record by going 20-0. The Gamecocks are currently 19-0, and with a strong week of beating Charlotte and sweeping Duke, Ariana Roddy, the All-America first baseman, she was named SEC softball co-player of the week. Women's basketball, they placed 5 members of their roster were recognized by the SEC coaches, led by a true freshman. Joyce Edwards was first team All-SEC. Her former middle school teammate, Malaysia Fulwiley, was the SEC 6th Woman of the Year. And Tahina Powell and Fulwiley were both on the 2nd team All-SEC. Sanaya Fagan and Raven Johnson earned spots on the all-defensive team, and Edwards also on the all-freshman team. Edwards becomes just the 3rd Gamecock, following in the footsteps of the 2 GOATs, coached by Dawn Staley, Asia Wilson and Aaliyah Boston, in being named first team All-SEC as a freshman. The Camden native was South Carolina's leading scorer. She averaged 14.4 points per game in SEC play, and her almost 56% field goal percentage was 4th in the SEC. And so, as we all know, the Gamecocks sent 11 players to the NFL Combine, and we're getting ready to break it all down with our man from Go Gamecocks and the state, a proud Sun Devil alumnus, Jordan Kaye, covering Gamecock football.
How are you?
For the state. Welcome home, brother. Welcome back in. How are you? How have you been?
I'm great, Keith. How are you?
I am doing well. I appreciate you asking. So Did the state pony up and send you up to Indianapolis for the combine, or did you just cover it from the friendly confines of your apartment?
I covered it from the friendly confines like everyone else. But yeah, I don't even know how much you're really going to get from going there. There's enough on Twitter, enough to see. It's a very made-for-TV event.
No doubt. So I don't know if you can smell it there in Columbia, but Jordan, we are officially 2 weeks away from the beginning of spring football. We are 13 days away as the Gamecocks will hold their pro day on March 18th, the day before spring practice gets underway. But, I mean, we can jump right into it, and I guess jump's a good word because Nick Eamon-Warry jumped out of Lucas Oil Stadium almost, recording a 43-inch vertical leap. Not only was that the top vertical leap for the safety, but that was the highest vertical leap by any player by an inch and a half. What a performance for Nick Eamon-Warry. I mean, he was declared the biggest winner of the combine, measuring in at 6'3" and 1/8, 220 pounds. He ran 4.38 in the 40, a 1.49 split. We talked about the vertical leap of 43 inches, 11.5 foot standing broad jump, and 20 reps on the bench press. He did not run in the 3-cone drill or the 20-yard shuttle, which I kind of would have liked to have seen what his time would have been in the shuttle. I guess maybe he'll do that at Pro Day, but just talk about the performance Nick Eamon-Warry turned in. Unbelievable.
He just elevated himself to a first rounder. And some people could have said, well, he was probably a first rounder to begin with, but I don't know, because I think going in, it was a 2-man race for the top safety between him and the Georgia safety, Malachi Starks. And if you want to go based off the history of what program develops better NFL players, you're like, hey, maybe I'll just take my chance with the Georgia guy. But what Nick Eamon-Warry did at the combine, like, he's the top safety in the draft. And I don't even think it's that difficult of a decision anymore. It's not just that he jumped and did all that stuff. It's that he did it at 220 pounds, where you kind of look around. It's like, there's no way the human body should be able to do it. And when you have that crazy freak athleticism, I think there's a tendency for people to see that in a combine and say, well, it doesn't really matter. It's the combine. You know, John Ross ran a 4.27. Byron Jones from UConn jumped 13 feet. Like, it doesn't matter. But like, Eamon-Warry has the film to back it up. And I think that's the biggest part. Your combine is not going to like jump you 4 rounds, but it's going to perhaps be the difference of, hey, he was going to be the second or third safety, and now he's going to be the first safety. And I think that's what did it. Eamon-Warry's film backs it all up. I mean, the athleticism, the way he can come downhill, the way he can be versatile and play multiple positions. I've heard a lot of people compare him to Kyle Hamilton with the Ravens. That's a guy you can just kind of put anywhere and you're going to be okay, because he has the athleticism and the size to make it happen. And I think Nick kind of proved, hey, I could perhaps be that guy in the NFL.
So you kind of froze up there for a second. So my comparison, because I'm an older guy, and Hamilton, I guess, is the modern comparison. My comparison has always been Steve Atwater, who played for the Denver Broncos. He played at Arkansas. He was 6'3", 218, very similar to Nick Eamon-Warry, but back at that time, there was just nobody that size that could hit and play safety. I mean, he was truly a unicorn at that time. And so the first post-combine NFL draft came out, I think, yesterday. I talked about it on the pod. I've compared Nick Eamon-Ward to Steve Atwater many times. And so, ironically, the ESPN draft had Nick Eamon-Ward going number 20 overall in the first round of the Denver Broncos. Steve Atwater in the 1989 NFL draft went number 20 overall to the Denver Broncos. But I mean, it was certainly one for the ages for him, not just 11.5-foot broad jump at 220 pounds, 43-inch vertical. He also did 20 reps at 225 pounds on the bench press. I mean, I think Eamon-Ward, he may not be on the board when Denver picks at 20 because of the versatility and the size for him to basically play free safety, strong safety, nickel, or be a dime linebacker.
Yeah, I always wonder how, like, and if for a while there, safety was like running back, where like NFL teams just didn't care. So I'm a little interested to see like how high a safety can go. I think like Hamilton was one of the rare ones, but other than that, I feel like it's normally like the 20s. But you're right, maybe what he did at the combine elevates him a little bit.
So, I mean, is it possible that the Bronco Nagurski winner on South Carolina's defense as the nation's top defensive player may be the third defensive player drafted off this team? Because my guy, Demetrius Knight, he had himself quite a day at the combine, measured about 6'1.5". He weighed 235, 4.58 in the 40 with a 1.58 split. I think he was like 22.76 or 7.8 miles per hour on the GPS, which was the fastest of all the linebackers. He ran a 4.25 shuttle, which I think is elite for that size because it measures your ability to change direction. He also did 22 reps on the bench, a 31.5-inch vertical, a broad jump of 9 feet, 10 inches, and a 3-cone drill of 7.12. There's a lot of talk going around about him potentially being a second-round draft pick, and I can believe it when you combine the character, the leadership, and the physical traits, and his film also backs it up.
Yeah, all those numbers you just told me, I guess it's weird, but none of them surprised me. If you watched Demetrius Knight all season, you knew he was insanely fast. You knew he changed directions ridiculously quick. Like that's what we saw, and it was surprising the last couple months that he wasn't like a top 3 round pick. I was like, did anyone watch the film? Like this guy was everywhere. And I don't know if that's NFL teams being a little scared away of a guy who's whatever, 24, 25. Maybe that's it. Maybe they're just like, hey, he wasn't even the top defensive player on his own team. So maybe it was that. And then if you talk about the Kennard piece, like TJ Sanders is probably going to go in the second round. Like there's a chance that Kennard's the fourth Gamecock take it, which holy cow, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but wow.
And so let's switch up. And I will say my man Rocket Sanders could be drafted ahead of him as well.
I would be shocked by that, but maybe.
Rocket Sanders, 4.46 in the 40, a 1.55 split, a 36.5-inch vertical, and his GPS number was close to 23 miles per hour as well. This is a guy that's an All-American, multiple-time All-SEC player, a guy that has done it at the highest level. And if I'm looking for a running back out there, I know everybody is consumed with this Genty guy from Boise State or whatever, but there wasn't a better transfer running back in America than Rocket Sanders. The numbers back it up. You look at the big plays he made in key stretches, the long runs he had against elite SEC opponents. I mean, I think there's certainly a case for Rocket Sanders being the second running back drafted, unless you're just looking for some little scat back. And even then, to me, that's like fourth or fifth round. I think wherever he gets drafted, if he doesn't get drafted on the second day, his second contract will be insane. That's my prediction.
I don't think he's I don't know if he's the top 2 running back. I think to me, Rocket Sanders was good. Like, I don't know that he blew me away this year. And if I'm an NFL team, I'm looking at a loaded running back class and a guy in Rocket Sanders who has had significant injury history. That would scare me a little bit. Granted, you're right. His speed for the size is ridiculous. He did kind of come on towards the end of the season, had a couple big runs. He's really good at breaking contact. So there is a lot to like about him. But, I mean, this is a loaded running back class, and I'm kind of curious, like, where he ends up in that mix, because he's one of those guys where he could be like the 5th running back or like the 15th running back, and I have no idea, like, which one it's going to be.
All right, so let's talk about another guy that I think's flown under the radar. How much do you think Joshua Simon helped his case at the combine? He's measured 6'4", 239 pounds. He ran 4.65, which was the second fastest of all tight ends. He had a 1.58 split, a 38-inch vertical. He broad jumped 10 feet, 4 inches. And he had a 4.4 flat shuttle. And the tape is there. I mean, the ability to catch, the ability to break tackles, the ability to run away from people. I think he's one of the more underrated guys, and a guy that, I mean, outside of the LSU tight end, who else is out there that's better than him?
I mean, there's a lot. The Penn State tight end is going to be a first rounder. There's a kid from I think Bowling Green who was unbelievable this year. Colson Loveland from Michigan is fantastic. Like, that's the problem, like, with Rocket Sanders and Josh Simon. Like, it's a weird year where there's a lot of running backs and a lot of tight ends. But I'm with you. I love Josh Simon. Like, I thought what he did this season was fantastic. I think he has the size. He shows he's a willing blocker. His combine numbers back it up. He's the guy where I'm like, he should be a top 5 tight end. And I'm with you. Okay, maybe he's not a day 1 or 2 pick, but I would love to see his second NFL contract, because I think he's a dude. Get him in a camp, and he's going to just really impress you. But it does stink because he didn't have the stats prior to this year. And I think that could be, he's also an older guy. So perhaps that's the concern, but you're right. He had a heck of a year and showed everything you want to show.
I mean, he did have great production at Western Kentucky as well. I just think probably my only criticism of Dow Loggins was his love for Trey Knox, because that was just his guy. I think everybody inside Williams-Brice Stadium or watching South Carolina play was like, why is he out there over Joshua Simon? I mean, Other than that, I thought Dow Loggins was great for South Carolina. All right, Kyle Kennard, the Bronco Nagurski Award winner, led the SEC in sacks, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, first team. He was an All-American, 4.73 in the 40, 23 reps on the bench and a 1.63 split. Him and some of South Carolina's defensive linemen did not participate in all of the drills. Some of them were coming off injury. With the premium that's on edge rushers, though, I got to think Kennard goes maybe at some point on day 2. Probably third round would be my guess.
Yeah, I would think so. He's one of those where I wasn't super impressed by the 40, which was surprising because I thought the biggest thing that makes him successful is how fast he is and his get off, how much he can just accelerate past offensive linemen. And maybe that's something that you can't really tell in a 40. He's not running 40 yards. He's running like 8. So do we really need
10 yards?
Yeah.
Really for defensive linemen.
Yeah. So, it's a little silly to be like, oh, well, he's not fast because he ran a 4.73. It's like he never needs to run 40 yards.
Right.
But yeah, I'd be shocked too. How is he not a day 3 guy? Turn on the film of what he did against. If we're saying the SEC is the best football conference, look at what he did against the best football conference, against Alabama and Ole Miss and LSU and all these teams that finished in the top 25. And he was just a game wrecker. That's a weird one to me where somehow he's like dropped since the season ended. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense how that's happened. I don't know if there's other guys. I'm not too familiar with the edge position. I've heard it's pretty loaded this year, but yeah, I think Kyle Kennard proved everything you would want this past season. And yeah, I feel like he's got to be a top 3 round pick.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with the NFL and why the bust rate is so high. It's like 50% bust rate on first round picks. It's because they, like the college season, except for the playoff, ends in November, and they don't draft until like the end of April. And so they have 5 months and they go around, and instead of watching the tape or watching guys play at the Senior Bowl, which by all accounts, he had a great week of practice. I don't think he participated in the game. They get infatuated by what guys do in shorts and T-shirts.
Yeah.
Indoors. And football is not played in shorts and T-shirts indoors. And so, I love him. Bam Martin Scott, 6'2", 231, ran 4.63 in the 40, had a 33.5-inch vertical, over a 10-foot broad jump, 4.53 in the shuttle. He's an older guy too. He's probably round 4 to 6, but a guy that's very productive and has positional versatility, because I think he could play any linebacker spot because he's done it at South Carolina.
Bam?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, aside from this season, I think he was second or third on the team in tackles. Like, he didn't have a very productive career at South Carolina. He's also a guy that's going to be, I think, 25 years old. That's a tougher one. I see your point that he can be versatile. If you're a team that plays some of that 3-3-5 that he showed he was extremely good at. Maybe he's a target for you. But yeah, I think he came on this last year, and I think he wore the green dot every once in a while, or at least knew all the positions, where you mentioned he has versatility at the linebacker room. He's an interesting one because I don't really know where he's going to go. I could see like 4th round to undrafted and anywhere in between. So I think that one probably comes down to what his pro day looks like, how he interviews with teams, and what coaches say about him.
I agree. So TJ Sanders, almost 6'4", 297, 31.5-inch vertical for a guy that's almost 300 pounds, broad jump of 9 feet 4 inches. He ran a 4.46 shuttle. The NFL, that same ESPN draft had him going in the 2nd round to the Buffalo Bills, which Jack Veltri would love because that's his favorite team. And they need help on the defensive front. I think he helped himself. Tonka Hemingway, I mean, he's another versatile guy. Vertical 32 inches. Had a 4.48 shuttle at 285 pounds. Broad jump of 9 feet 4 inches. What do you think about Hemingway and then Jules, who didn't do anything, I think, except get measured? And he was like 6'4", 315, had long arms and big hands.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see. I think for him and for Hemingway, none of those guys did the bench press. I think teams are going to want to see that at the pro day.
Yeah. Defensive tackle is one of those positions where, unless you're intently watching it with a pretty impressive football IQ, you don't really know like who's good and who's not. I was shocked. After the season, I was like looking up mock drafts, and TJ Sanders was the 1st round, and I was like, what? TJ Sanders? And then you go back, I look at his stats, I look at his PFF grades, like, holy cow, he was one of the best defensive tackles in the country. And it was kind of a weird one in a way, because you get so infatuated with Stewart and Kennard coming off the edge and getting sacks. TJ Sanders like flew under the radar for me. I knew he was good. I didn't know he was one of the top defensive tackles in the country. And so that was pretty crazy to see. And then you start hearing about kind of the double teams he was taking on. And there's a lot of football stuff behind the scenes that his stats don't exactly show. But yeah, he started a couple months ago as a 1st rounder. I think he's dipped a little bit since then. And maybe that's a guy who can show more at his pro day in 2 weeks. Same with Tonka. I'm not really sure if Jules was dealing with an injury or something. Seems a little odd to me to go to the combine as a fringe guy and not participate. I would assume injury or something else. But yeah, those 3 guys I don't really know, aside from, I would say Sanders is probably a 2nd or 3rd rounder at this point.
So one interesting stat that I read off of is either PFF or the NFL Network. Mm-hmm. His time to first contact on pass rush was 2.40 seconds. That was the fastest among all FBS linemen in pass rush. That includes edge rushers. I mean,
wow.
I think if Dylan Stewart hadn't have been held on about 60% of his plays, he might have beat that with that little dip move with him, the bend, being able to get around guys. I went back and watched some of the highlights. He's getting held. His jersey's getting pulled. he breaks away and still the quarterback falls on the ground and he gets the sack. But for TJ Sanders to have that get off and that fastest inside pass rush, I think that really, along with the size, the athleticism, the long arms, the basketball background, and the film, I think that's what makes him, a guy that we could see now that it's back to T-shirts and shorts season. He could rise more. But I agree. I think he's probably a second rounder. I know Torricelli Simpkins went up there and just got measured and ran the worst 40 time of any offensive lineman, which was kind of surprising to me. He didn't do anything else, but his film was awfully good. And I know he came from an FBS school, but he was, an Outland Trophy weekly winner 2 times during the season. And then there's Kai Kroger. So it's really a total of 12 guys because the specialists, they have their own special day at the combine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Kai Kroger is a guy that's going to have a long NFL career as a punter because he's a 6'3" or 6'4" guy that's also an elite holder and a guy that can throw the football.
Also, I don't know how much teams like this. If I'm a coach, I would love a lefty punter. Much harder to catch a punt spinning off a lefty's foot just because it's so unorthodox and you're not practicing it as much. I would love a lefty punter, and I think that is a benefit to him.
I mean, I agree. I said when South Carolina signed him, I thought that'd be worth, maybe 2 or 3 turnovers a season. But mostly he just boomed it over punters' heads and pinned teams down inside the 10-yard line, punt returners' heads. So we'll see. So in the few minutes we have left before we bring on your cohort, Michael Sauls, who just popped into the waiting room, spring practice is 2 weeks away. Give me maybe what are your top 2 position battles on offense, and then maybe we'll go to defense, or just in general, what are the biggest 30,000-foot view? What are some of the things you are, looking to see when spring practice starts 2 weeks from today?
Yeah, I think the 2 big ones are these freshman wide receivers have to play. And it's not just one of them has to hit. Like, it's got to be 2, 3, maybe even 4 play right away. They did not go after a transfer, or they did not sign a transfer wide receiver. That tells me they are awfully confident. And based off the rankings and the film of some of these guys, Donovan Murph, Jordan Gidron, Lex Cyrus, Brian Rowe, go on and on. These dudes are really, really good. But how quickly it's not just can one of them transition right away as a freshman. You're asking like 3 of them to do that. I think they have the ability, but I'm curious to see how far along they are right now. Then on the defensive side, am I froze or you got me?
No, I got you.
Okay.
Far away.
Defense is good. Defensive side. This is a team in South Carolina that they won 9 games last year because they hit at a incredible rate on their transfers. They got Kyle Kennard. They got Demetrius Knight. They got Torricelli Simpkins. I'm trying to even, there were all the transfers they got, they not incredible, but Dale Von Campbell, Jared Brown, those guys started games. They have to hit on these transfers. Yeah. Yep. They have to hit on these transfers. Yeah. Rocket Sanders, yeah, that was the big one I forgot. They have to hit on these transfers. Like, you lose 7 defensive starters, and I think we all believe there's going to be some younger guys that take those spots, notably Fred J.R. Johnson is probably going to start. Okay, that's one. Now you're left with 6 other spots to fill. Is that all going to be transfers? Is that going to be a mix of just depth guys from last year and transfers? Do these transfers look the part? Where are they going? Like, when they line up these defensive tackles, is Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, I know, came from Texas A&M, was a former, top 10, top 20 recruit in the country. Like, what does he look like at spring practice? That's kind of my question, because they are going to need, again, like the wide receivers, 3 or 4 of those guys on the defensive side to hit. And what do they look like coming out of the gate? I know that doesn't mean everything, because these guys have only been on campus for 2 months, only had the playbook for 2 months, haven't been through a practice. We're not going to see everything right away, but hey, how are they fitting in? What do they look like? Does it seem like there's a chance they could, be in the mix?
No doubt. I mean, so for me, also, I would throw in, is Shane Beamer really going to go into a second season with Lenora Sellers, and now as a college football playoff contender by most of the pundits, without a place kicker that's ever kicked a field goal in a game?
Oh, what a question. A great call. Yeah, again, one of those things I forgot about. How did they not go get a transfer kicker? How? It's insane.
I mean, I don't know, but to me, I know Darren Usher was on with JC and Phil on the morning show, and they talked about continuing to be aggressive in the portal with defensive tackles, and yes, by all means, bring in more defensive tackles. To me, defensive tackle. And what do you do with Jalen Kilgore? To me, I think he should be the guy that replaces Nick Emanwari at safety. You brought in Brandon Cisse. You got Jalua Solomon. You got Miles Norwood. You got Bakari Swain. You got all these corners, Judge Collier. I think Jalen Kilgore is probably maybe other than Bakari Swain, the best natural athlete in that secondary. I might move him back there, but at bowl practice, your guy Joe D. Camillus did talk about in the spring portal period getting a kicker, and I think that has got to be paramount.
And I did forget, so in South Carolina's defense, Alabama waited throughout their whole spring and then went and signed Miami, Ohio kicker, who was a Luke Rosa award finalist, or actually winner. And they waited through spring. So maybe that's more how the specialist market works. Hey, wait for some guys to go through spring. Maybe there's some guys who, I don't know, elevate or something. I wouldn't understand why you would do that, but maybe there's some guys who want to get school done. I don't know. Perhaps that's a thing. And then go give them the bag, because I think that's what Alabama did, especially the Miami of Ohio coach was livid in lieu of that, just kind of saying that Alabama just went in and dropped a bag for him. But maybe that's the thing. Hey, we have our eye on a couple kickers from lower levels. We're going to kind of just wait a little bit, see if they enter the portal, and then go get them. Perhaps that's the thing. I don't, but it's a little odd to me.
I mean, perhaps there's a guy, hypothetically speaking, perhaps there's a guy that's from the state of South Carolina that maybe, bless you, is, that kicked a 56-yard field goal in a bowl game that may or may not be on the schedule that I would certainly drop a big bag on, because as we've talked about so many times, and then I'm going to get you out of here, this is a huge season. The expectations are there for South Carolina. I think it's also huge Nick Harbor is going through spring practice and foregoing track. The margin for error, like we saw against LSU and Alabama, 2 games South Carolina could have won with a really good kicker. So we'll see what happens in April. I'm looking forward to getting you back once spring practice gets going. We can really talk about those position battles. Great stuff on the combine, and always great to have you back on the show. Be well, and we'll look forward to catching up with you in a few weeks.
Thanks, Keith. Have a good one.
All right. All right, Michael Sauls has been waiting patiently. Let's bring him in. Michael, how the hell are you? It's been a wild week.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm good. Good to be here.
Awesome. So South Carolina finishes 15-1. And tied for first with Texas. They split the season series. For some reason, you have to flip a coin. I don't understand that. Like, why don't you look at the net rankings? Why don't you look at the point differential with the top teams in the conference, or head-to-head point differential? They didn't do that. Greg Sankey at halftime of the Ole Miss LSU game. By the way, suck it, Kim Mulkey. That's we have to do that on a daily basis here. South Carolina wins the toss. They are the number 1 seed. But, I mean, quite frankly, I'm looking at the net rankings, and I went back and looked at South Carolina's schedule. Fair or unfair, I did not look at Texas' schedule because this is not a Texas podcast. But South Carolina was ranked number 2 in the net, Texas number 3 in the net, although I don't really understand that because their non-conference schedule outside of losing to Notre Dame was basically ass. But UConn, I don't really understand that either. They had the number 1 in the net. I mean, maybe because they boat raced South Carolina.
That probably helped.
That definitely helped. But they were 6-3 against Quad 1. South Carolina was 14-3 in Quad 1. So in the net, they lost to the number 1. Or in the polls, they lost to the number 1 team in the country by 4 at their place when they couldn't buy a basket with a fistful of $100 bills in the fourth quarter. They lost at UCLA early in the season. They spent most of the year ranked number 1. They finished number 5. And then UConn, let's face it, it wasn't South Carolina's day, and UConn just shot the lights out. They are number 3 in the country. So I don't understand why South Carolina is the 4th number 1 seed when the net ranking is an important component in seeding, and UCLA's 5th in the net, Southern Cal is 6th in the net, but nobody played 17 Quad 1 teams, let alone nobody had 14 Quad 1 wins. I just don't think South Carolina gets enough credit for that. I think there is South Carolina fatigue, particularly with ESPN.
Yeah, I think you make a valid point to an extent. I mean, I think, and Don Staley's mentioned that as where South Carolina loses and it's just kind of like the whole world is ending kind of deal where everybody's just so used to them winning all the time. And maybe there is some South Carolina fatigue. But I don't know, with all the, with the AP poll and with where they are in the net and everything and where they're projected to be seated, you got to take that up with the committee. Lord knows, nobody knows what the committee's thinking year to year, much less, day to day. But to your point about the coin toss, I thought the coin toss was hilarious. I was a big fan of the fact that they made it a TV spectacle. I'm glad they did that. Like, I'm glad they didn't just send out a press release that said, "Hey, South Carolina won the coin toss, believe us," kind of deal. It was very much SEC college sports coded, the way that they were like, "Hey, we're gonna make this a 6-minute TV special." But I think going forward, and I said this on 107.5 Game yesterday, I think we should probably add another tiebreaker scenario before the coin flip. Now that, the coin flip has been the third option since the 90s and we've never had to use it. But now that they had to use it, they should probably add some sort of, whether it be, like you said, the point differential and head-to-head or literally any other thing. I think now that they've had to use the coin flip, they should probably bump that down to like the fourth option or the fifth option. Keep it because it's funny and I love it. But they should probably be bumped down 1 or 2 notches going forward.
Yeah, I think the net ranking, that's a huge deal when it comes to seeding for the tournament. And look, the conference, you're potentially staring down a third meeting between South Carolina and Texas, and it's essentially going to be a home crowd atmosphere at Bon Secours Arena in Greenville should both teams make the finals, which I think South Carolina, quite frankly, has a tougher road than Texas does because Floje Johnson is going to sit out the SEC tournament. Plus, LSU, they lost their last 2 games of the regular season. They kind of, I guess, got caught up in, I've always said, Kim Mulkey's got to face it, make a freight train take a dirt road. I think the train's gone off the tracks a little bit there. And Kentucky, I thought was a matchup nightmare for South Carolina. I personally thought they just didn't play Dawn Staley defense until about the last 6 minutes and 43 seconds of that game. It got down to a 1-possession game, and they finally woke the hell up and locked in on defense. And Malaysia Fulwiley and Kahina Paopao, who I would not say is one of South Carolina's better defenders, but her anticipation in getting steals and tie-ups, I thought was really huge down the stretch of that game. I just did not like the way they were. Kentucky would get them in a big on little ball screen, and it was like both players would get mixed up on who they were supposed to cover, and a shooter was wide freaking open.
Yeah, you're right. That the last 6-7 minutes of defense was that's the South Carolina basketball I think all of us are so used to watching, and not even just the defense, but kind of everything in those last 7 minutes was South Carolina basketball. And it was a little odd that it took them a second to get going there, but as you saw, once they did lock in there, I think it was they went on a 12-2 run and forced 7 turnovers, which was half of the turnovers that they forced in the entire game just in that span. But I feel like the fact that they were able to lock back in and get that done is a good sign in the sense of, there are going to be days where you just don't have it at all. And if you're going to have it, you want it to be at the end down the stretch in a game like that. So I feel like there's pros and cons to not locking in until then, but the fact that they were able to in a big game with a lot on the line, I feel like is probably a good sign for March.
I agree. I still go back to, South Carolina. I think maybe was it at Alabama when Ashlyn Watkins got injured? I can't remember.
Mississippi State, I think.
That's right. It was at Mississippi State early in SEC play. I really thought, she was the best rim protector on the roster. I knew that would probably cost them a game. I think at Texas could have been that game. But Sanaya Fagan stepped up. Chloe Kitts has stepped up. Joyce Edwards. And so bear with me while I lay this out for you. So South Carolina returned every member off of a perfect 38-0 undefeated national champ. They had all the win streaks going. They had not lost a regular season game in 2 years. Their only loss in 2 years was when the refs totally screwed Aaliyah Boston and South Carolina over against Iowa in the national semifinals in Dallas. I was right behind the bench for that. It was easy to see. But yet their only first-team player is a true freshman. I mean, to me, that's kind of an indictment on everybody else. But at the same time, it speaks to just how special Joyce Edwards is. And I did not anticipate when she came in that she would be a starter. But, with Watkins out on the suspension, and then after the injury, you just saw the talent and the cream rise to the crop. I mean, what does it say about Joyce Edwards that she comes in and makes first team All SEC, just the third player in school history to do it, in elite company with, number 22 is retired, and she's got a statue in front of the arena.
Yeah.
Asia Wilson, easily the most decorated student athlete in the history of South Carolina sports, and Aaliyah Boston, who was, the number one pick of the WNBA draft, the rookie of the year, led South Carolina to 3 Final Fours and probably what should have been 3 national championships. They got jabbed against Stanford and Iowa, but Joyce Edwards averaging 14.5 points a game in SEC play and shot 57% in league play from the field. Just a tremendous season for the 6'3" freshman.
Yeah, I mean, she's been phenomenal to watch. It's one of those things where you expect a recruit of her caliber to come in and make an impact. And that's one thing, but it's another thing for them to come in and make that impact night in and night out on a consistent basis, which is what she's done all year. But also you've been able to slowly watch her get more comfortable and better. It seems so easy when she's, on the court, everything is slowed down. I feel like maybe there's been a bit of a freshman wall just because she's not, scoring. I think they had a couple games in the last 2 weeks where she didn't score 10 points. And it was all right, well, again, she's a freshman and everybody else stepped up that night. Not that big of a deal. But she has been, like you said, phenomenal to watch this season. She's been great. Obviously, I'm sure whatever the ballots were for freshman of the year for the conference, I'm sure it was close between her and Michaela Blakes. I would love to get the peek behind the curtain and see how that ballot broke down between the coaches in the league to see how close it was. But the fact that, hey, if you're not going to get freshman of the year, but you are going to be first team All SEC as a freshman coming off the bench, I mean, that's as good as it gets in terms of, accolades and awards for a year like she's had. So, yeah, I think she's great. I'm excited to see how if she took it up a notch in SEC play. I'm interested to see if she's able to take it up another notch, find another gear with the postseason here.
Well, I mean, South Carolina's leading 2 scorers in SEC play. Both came off the bench. Malaysia Fulwiley, second team All SEC, and the winner as the 6th Woman of the Year, joining former All-Americans Elena Coates and Camila Cardoso, who won it coming off the bench when Aaliyah Boston was a senior. Fulwiley, I really thought, really picked up her defense as the season went on. Dawn Staley talked about that. You began to see, her and Edwards coming in as the first subs off the bench. And I got to say, even though she didn't have as consistent of a season, I'm hoping the game that Tessa Johnson had on Sunday can really catapult her, because I think she is extremely important for this team, because she may be South Carolina's most dynamic scorer, because she is so athletic. She's over 6 feet tall. She can knock down the three. She's great in the mid-range, and she can get to the rim, and she can defend multiple positions.
Yeah, to your point about Malaysia first, that's another one I want to get the peek behind the curtain, what the ballot was like for 6th Woman of the Year, because I feel like you could probably flip a coin and choose between Joyce Edwards or her for that, considering they're both, the first 2 players off the bench leading the defending national champions and scoring. And so your point about our defense, that's been one thing that's really stood out to me. Obviously, I've only been on the beat for 2 months, but watching her last year as just a person who watches the game, that her calling card, I guess, or whatever you want to say, was she's the flashy player on offense. She gets it done on offense, highlight plays, yada, yada, yada. She has really stepped up on defense. I mean, in terms of people who are actively playing, I think she's number 2 on the team in blocks behind Sanaya Fagan. She has talked openly about how she feels like she takes more pride in her defense this year, and how she, is enjoying playing defense, which I think is a massive step for her game, but also just for the maturation of a basketball player. I feel like that's really big for her, and that will only continue to help her as she, as her career continues on. And then to your point about Tessa, yeah, it was good to see her score. I think it was 16 the other night against Kentucky, considering she was like in a bit of a shooting slump, I guess not necessarily, but you could definitely tell like her offense had been a little off in the last couple games. That was good to see that from her. Obviously, she was huge in the tournament last year, has proved that she can shoot the lights out of the ball. So I'm assuming that'll probably help her get going as we step into the tournament, but also just beyond her shooting. I mean, she was leading the team in rebounds, I think, going into halftime. So, like, the fact that even when she wasn't shooting well, she was able to kind of put that to the side and find ways to impact the box score, find other ways to impact the box score. I think that's a good sign for South Carolina in general.
I also love, Chloe Kitts didn't get to the mention of this. She was the co-SEC Player of the Week, and then she was named by the U.S. Basketball Writers of America one of the Players of the Week. She had a historic triple-double and did it in a way no other player has done it, with points, rebounds, and assists, and had a double-double against Kentucky. For the week, she averaged 14 points, 11.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists per game, 16 points, 13 rebounds, 10 assists against Ole Miss, and then 12 points and 10 rebounds against number 14 Kentucky. What a week for Chloe Kitts, and I like that she is becoming a more willing three-point shooter. I really think she still gets in trouble when she tries to go down and bully her way inside against bigger opponents. Although she does get the occasional and one. I think she's a lot better when she's facing up and taking jump shots.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, Dawn talked about, I think before the Ole Miss game, that she doesn't want the team to wait to start playing its best basketball until March. Like, she wants it to start playing its best basketball now. And I think the way that Chloe has played in the last week is kind of indicative of that. And, a triple-double, which was historic in its own right, and then you follow that up with a double-double, in your next game out. But I also think, Dawn has talked about how she puts a lot of pressure on Chloe to kind of, perform up to the talent that she knows that Chloe Kitts has. And so I think that, that's a hell of a way to respond to that pressure, is notching the 9th triple-double in program history. But no, I think she's heating up at the right time. And that's exactly what South Carolina needs. There are games where it feels like, 1 or 2 people may be scoring, but they need that third person to help. And whether that is Chloe Kitts on one night or Chloe Kitts one of the other two, I think the fact that she's able to heat up on offense is good for South Carolina. Good sign for March.
I agree. Raven Johnson and Sanaya Fagan make the all-defensive team. I don't think Raven Johnson's had as good a season offensively. It has been good to see Fagan after she was pretty steady and then going along, and then all of a sudden it was kind of like she hit a wall. She came back this past week with, I thought, 2 really good games. And so the SEC tournament just got underway in Greenville. If you're watching on the SEC network, it's Tennessee and Texas A&M. And man, Tennessee, they really struggled to get to the finish line, losing a couple of games in the last week, like LSU. How do you like South Carolina's side of the bracket? I think, ideally you're looking for Tennessee and Vanderbilt and South Carolina to play the winner of that game. And then, you're going to get Oklahoma and Kentucky. And you did beat Oklahoma by 41 points, by the way. And that ends up being a top 10 win for South Carolina. So if you look at how teams finish the season, South Carolina beat number 1 Texas by 17. They beat number 7 NC State by 14 on a neutral floor. Number 8 TCU on the road by 33 points. Number 9 LSU by 10 points. And Duke finished right outside of the top 10. I don't know why they're not in the top 10, but and Oklahoma finished 10th. So, and Kentucky went up to number 12. South Carolina just beat them by double digits. I kind of think Texas has the easier road because no Floje Johnson for LSU, and they have no depth. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, before they announced that she was out, I kind of figured that, South Carolina is the 1 seed. They kind of by default get the easier side of the bracket. But I honestly still think if I'm South Carolina, I'd rather play Kentucky or Oklahoma as opposed to LSU in that semifinal game of the tournament. Just because I feel like LSU gave them a little bit more of a hard time than, obviously than Oklahoma, given that they beat Oklahoma by, almost 50 points. They beat Kentucky, but I don't know. It's March, so literally anything can happen. And I feel like all history and matchups goes out the window immediately once March comes. But I don't know. I feel like it's the SEC. It's going to be one of the hardest SEC tournaments that it's ever been. This is the deepest the league has ever been. You could certainly make a case for really the 1 through 6 seeds on how they could all make a run and win. So I don't know. I feel like it would be equally as challenging on either side if they were the 1 or the 2. So you just kind of had to buck up and go play whoever you got to play and see if you can win.
I agree. Just knowing, though, that Floje Johnson is going to be out for the tournament, to me, I think that makes it a little bit easier. All right, so, we heard Kim Mulkey talk about, I've never played a team with 10 McDonald's All-Americans. And then you hear Kenny Brooks, well, they just substitute McDonald's All-Americans for McDonald's All-Americans. Well, bad news, SEC. South Carolina just picked up their second McDonald's All-American. And really, I think maybe the second best player in this class in Agot Makeer, a 6'1", I guess native of North Dakota, moved and spent most of her life in Toronto, played for Team Canada on Kia Nurse AAU team, went to Montverde Academy down in Florida this year. She picked South Carolina over UConn and Michigan State, which is the closest in proximity to Toronto. You have to essentially drive right through, it's right off the interstate before you get to Buffalo. South Carolina now with bringing in 2 more McDonald's All-Americans, Isla McDowell, who I think is very underrated and has had a huge senior season out in Cypress Springs, out in the Houston area. And then they get Makeer, who is really, up until this year, was a 6'1" point guard. And then she played off the ball. And with her length and ability to shoot, handle, the rich get richer. And when you're a Gamecock, you love that. Just like you see Kirby Smart and Nick Saban piling up those number 1 recruiting classes. South Carolina now with just 2 players, the number 5 recruiting class. And I don't think they're getting Chavez, but they are one of 4 finalists for her. And my conspiracy theory on this is maybe that's a reason if South Carolina is the pick, which I'm not saying it is. And Dawn Staley already knows she's getting her. That could have played a role in Raven Johnson walking on senior day. I don't think they're getting her, but I'm just saying that to me, that adds a little. I think it's going to be Texas Tech or Oklahoma because I think she wants to run the show and score 30 a game. That's just my thought. But your thought?
I don't know about how much that affected Raven's decision to walk. I think a lot of that was purely just wanting to walk with her, the people that were in her recruiting class. And I mean, she said, flat out multiple times now in the past couple of days that she hasn't made her decision on if she's walking or coming back. And Dawn has said that she is essentially leaving it up to Raven and that they'd welcome her back with open arms or would do anything they need to do to kind of help her get to the next level, yada, yada, yada. So I don't know how much that played in the Ravens' decision. I obviously cannot speak for Raven and or Dawn Staley. But I do think the rich get richer point, it's a really good way to put it. I think it's funny that I don't know if complain is the right word, but as an opposing coach, you talk about McDonald's All-Americans this, McDonald's All-American that, and I know it's so much easier said than done, but just go get your own McDonald's All-Americans. Obviously, I am by no means a recruiting expert, so obviously Dawn's got to be doing something right if she's bringing them in year after year. But I do think that it's interesting that is the talking point that these opposing coaches have decided to latch on to this year, seemingly. But what do I know?
So if South Carolina returns everybody other than Sanaya Fagan, Breezy Hall, Pow Pow, and I guess Sakima Walker, who was not a McDonald's All-American. If South Carolina does not add a former McDonald's All-American, the transfer portal, or add Chavez, they're only going to have 9 McDonald's All-Americans next year on the roster.
Only nine.
But I like this class because there really was not, I think there's only one post player in the class, but, you know, you're losing Pow and Breezy Hall, but you're bringing in 2 guards that are 6'1" and 6'2" that are capable of playing multiple positions, that are excellent 3-point shooters, that can handle the ball. Isla McDowell shot over 40% from 3 this year in a 6A, maybe the toughest basketball league in the state of Texas. Makeer and Isla McDowell, international experience playing for Team Canada and for Team Brazil. And they're 6'1" and 6'2". And Pow is like 5'8" or 5'9", I guess. And I think they're both superior athletes to the players they're losing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the rotation fills out next year with departures or potential departures. And then, you know for a fact you've got those 2 incoming freshmen, but then it's like, all right, well, do they go to the portal and get more experience at the guard position? I mean, it's going to be I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and, already skip through the SEC tournament and March Madness and everything. But I think next year it'll definitely be interesting. I feel like this season coming in, it was all right. You're getting everybody back. And I feel like question mark in a way has a negative connotation. I don't mean it that way, but next year all right, well, like, how are they going to do it now? Like last year, this season, you were returning all these people, but now it's like, all right, you're going to have to get a little bit creative with how you deal with things. So definitely something to watch once the offseason comes around, which, we'll be here before we know it.
I mean, I could see adding if you can find a post player, but I mean, you will return. Look, it's their time now after this year, after this run through the SEC tournament, hopefully to another Final Four in Tampa. They're going to be in Birmingham as a 1 or a 2 seed, depending on what happens in the SEC tournament. It's Malaysia Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson's time, along with Joyce Edwards, Chloe Kitts, Adele Tack. I think she will take a big step. A lot of people don't understand that she's missed most of her junior and senior seasons with injuries. You do bring in 2 more McDonald's All-Americans. Marion Dowda has shown some signs of life here at the end of the season. And don't forget about Maddie McDaniel, who I think has a tremendously high ceiling at point guard. You add Makeer, and so I thought it's funny after what Kenny Brooks said on Monday on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Dawn Staley does the ba-da-ba-ba-ba. And then, hey, Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey, basically after Makeer's committed, kind of clapping back on social media about the McDonald's All-Americans. I thought that was just hilarious.
Yeah, Dawn, ever the social media savant, she knew what she was doing. that was funny. That gave me a good laugh when I saw that. That's for sure.
No doubt. So the Gamecocks don't play until Friday. Our good friend Lulu Kesson from the Greenville News, she is in Greenville, even though she's in Columbia. She's covering it for the USA Today Network. When are you going up? And are you expecting it to be the third Battle of the Titans with South Carolina and Texas on Sunday afternoon at 3:00 on ESPN?
Yep, I'll be going up. What's today? Today's Wednesday. It's tomorrow night. I got family up in Liberty, South Carolina, about 45 minutes away from Greenville.
Dude, that's where I grew up. I graduated from Liberty High School. You've got to be kidding.
That's where my dad also went to Liberty High School. That's really funny. Yeah, man. My grandfather lives up there. I'm gonna go grab dinner with him and then hang out there and then start working on Friday morning, Friday afternoon.
Dude, we're going to have to talk about this off air because I got to get some info on this.
Yeah.
So, what year did your dad graduate from Liberty High School?
I could not tell you that off the top of my head. That's a great question.
All right. Well, we'll have to catch up off air on that. I actually grew up in Norris. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
everybody that grew up in Liberty, they kind of look down on us because we didn't live in Liberty. But at any rate, good for you. Something for us to catch up on. I'm intrigued to know about that.
Yeah.
I'll have to dig through the old yearbooks, maybe on your grandfather. I don't know. But at any rate, be well, safe travels, enjoy family. Liberty really hadn't changed that much. I guess now you can go to Yanks Cafe.
Yeah.
Jody Whitaker runs that now, the son of Yank Whitaker. It is a historical joint in Liberty.
Yeah.
It used to be Joy's Cafe, named after their mom. After Yank died, Jody and Mandy, their two youngest kids, they took it over and changed the name to Yanks Cafe because Yank Whitaker, a legend, always chewing on a cigar. And every time you went and got a cheeseburger and fries and a drink, it was a different price. I think it depended on what it used to be. Well, it's not now, but it used to be what Winn-Dixie always got fresh ground beef from there. But also, a small orange juice costs more than a large orange juice back at Yanks Cafe.
Sounds about right.
I may or may not have had a phony ID, and we would get the large orange juice and mix it with Everclear 190 or vodka back in the day. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it happened, but I can neither confirm nor deny.
I feel like maybe the statute of limitations might have passed on that.
That's right. The statute of limitations definitely have run out on that. Michael, be well. Great stuff as always, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
All right. That was Michael Sauls, Family Connections in Liberty. Norris, where the men are men and the cows are scared at night, just like you could say about pretty much any small town. All right, so I got a great Tom Allen story. Okay, I was doing baseball last weekend up in Georgetown, and the parents were sitting right behind home plate. And so I started talking to this guy, Don. I don't know, Don, if you're listening, let's get in touch. I got to get in touch with you. We're going to get a beer. We wound up after the weekend exchanging numbers. So his son played for Tom Allen at Indiana, and he had transferred there from Texas Tech. And so he met his son met his wife there, defensive lineman, transferred to Indiana. So she's getting ready to have a baby. And so they're both going to fly back home. So I think his flight was first. She's getting ready to get on the plane in Bloomington, and she'd had a difficult pregnancy. And the baby is getting ready to come. There's complications at the airport, and she can't get in touch with her husband. Don gets a phone call. He can't get in touch. And so he calls Tom Allen, who is on a recruiting trip. And he leaves the dinner and goes to the hospital, and him and his wife stayed with her for like 2 or 3 days until she had the baby. I mean, if that doesn't tell you what kind of dude, I mean, we talked about, I love Tom Allen. He hired Kalen DeBoer, who, let's face it, didn't have the greatest first year at Alabama, but rule number one, never follow a legend. I still think he's the right guy for the job and was the only call Alabama should have made. We talked about that. A bunch of stuff, even some SEC stuff. His youngest son was a catcher. Jude, very cool. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but I know Tom Allen's at Clemson now, and I know we all hate Clemson, but after you hear what Tom Allen, who was the head coach, he could have sent the position coach. He could have sent a GA, okay? But no, he left a recruiting dinner and went to the hospital, and him and his wife stayed with her until the family could get there and until the child was born. And so I know, look, we I notoriously have called Dabo Swinney an ass clown. I think he's a phony. I think he's a crook. But Tom Allen, I always thought was a stand-up guy. But after hearing that, how can you pull against that guy except on one Saturday, the last Saturday? Maybe it'll be Friday this year in the fall. So that men's basketball, they lost on senior day to Georgia. I think that was, 74-63 or 73-64, something like that. At any rate, 73-64 to Georgia. They're going to get boat raced at Tennessee on Saturday. They're going to finish 2-16. Jeremiah Donati, he's going to get this thing fixed through NIL. But I also think that it's time for Lamont Paris to take a look in the mirror, okay? My biggest criticism of him, other than his first year, I didn't like the way he handled late in-game situations. They set a record for wins last year, but they took a knife to a gunfight when it come to recruiting this year in NIL money. They had less than half the money of most SEC programs. Jeremiah Donati's going to fix that. But I think Lamont Paris, and I said this at the time, I'm saying it now. When it comes to recruiting in the Southeastern Conference, it is shark-infested waters. And you've got to have sharks on your coaching staff leading the way in recruiting. Sharks, not minnows, not sea bass, not sea turtles. Okay, sharks. he brought his entire staff from UT Chattanooga, and then he hired the shot doctor who's gone. They got my man Will Bailey in there. But I think you really got to examine your coaching staff, and you got to decide if Eddie Shannon and Tanner Bronson are the guys that can be sharks in recruiting. Because you look at the bench at Auburn and at Alabama and at Tennessee and at Mississippi State and Ole Miss and all the, there's 12 teams going to make the conference. Hell, look at John Calipari's bench. They're going to make it. You beat them. Look at Georgia at Mike White, what he did in recruiting. And by the way, your number 1 or number 2 guard prospect in the transfer portal, he was playing against you because he was at Georgia because they could give him more NIL money than you could. And so I think those are the two things. I don't question Lamont Paris's ability to recruit or to coach, but you can't go into a heavyweight boxing match with one hand tied behind your back. And so to me, the big question is, what is South Carolina going to do with that basketball roster? What is Lamont Paris going to do with his staff? Is he going to make tough choices? Maybe he doesn't feel like he has to make any changes. Maybe NIL money will fix it. I remember he didn't even go with the team to the SEC tournament after his first year. He went to BJ Mack's house to meet with him. That was huge. He wound up picking South Carolina. Talon Cooper, Michi Johnson, okay. But clearly, South Carolina's starting backcourt this year, they wouldn't have been one of the top starting backcourts in the Southern Conference, okay, let alone in the best conference in America. You got virtually nothing from Cam Scott this year. I'm interested to see on the roster who comes back. Colin Murray-Boyle's probably gone to the NBA. I do think Cam Scott at some point will be a really good player. Arden Conyers. I would bring Jordan Butler and Nick Pringle back if he can come back. Zach Davis. I don't know. I know they got 4 guys they signed to come in. I don't really think any of those guys are going to be impact players. I hope I'm wrong. Federico, he finally got in. He redshirted, 6'11". What can he do? I think South Carolina's got to probably get 4 players out of the portal, which means you're going to have to process some guys. 2-16 after finishing in a tie for second. That's just not what you want to do. But South Carolina's got to support Lamont Paris with NIL money for recruiting, and South Carolina has got to hit in the transfer portal like they did with Michi Johnson, Talon Cooper, and BJ Mack, even though he wasn't the most athletic. Maybe, I don't know. I think you got to get a point guard, you got to get a wing player, and you got to get another big. Maybe you need 2 guards. I don't know. I like I said, Scott and Arden Conyers, Yuga Suit, those guys have got to take leaps, but you also are going to have to make some tough decisions as well. So that's going to be a wrap for today. Appreciate everybody watching live on YouTube, on X, and everybody who will listen on Apple and Spotify. So until next Wednesday, this is Keith Allsep saying go Gamecocks. God bless everybody. I'm out of here.